Good afternoon and welcome to our Chamber South Spotlight with our partners here at Miami Community Newspapers. My name is Brittnie Bassant and I'm the Executive Director for Chamber South. And today I have two very special guests with me. I have Mr. Mikhail Scott and Dr. Bruce James, and we're going to be talking all things COVID vaccine. So I'm going to get right into it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Thank you for having us today. It's awesome to be here. This is actually my first time working with a community newspaper, so it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, big shout out to Miami Community Newspapers. They are incredible partners of our community, pillars in our community. So we're very, very, very grateful for them for the opportunity to have you on the show. So there are two names up on the screen,
Right.
Obviously, Mikhail Scott and Dr. James, but there's also Indelible and Vax 305.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about those two organizations, how they work together, what your roles are, how you got into this, and what you're trying to do.
Well, absolutely. So Indelible is the firm, right? So Indelible is a national management consulting firm, and we actually serve state and local government entities around mostly emergency management, but we also have a lot of other professional services that essentially assist state and local government entities stand up programs. Right now, we're working on COVID-19 response, but our firm has also done things around hurricane response, as well as a few other healthcare related projects here in Florida and outside of the state.
Okay, wonderful. And that funding is through the Department of Health for the COVID-19 response.
So currently we're partnered with the Division of Emergency Management. So that's where the contract is actually with, but we're also working very closely with DOH. They've been helping us with resources as well as updates and information. So it's a great partnership to be working with both of those agencies on such a very important topic.
Okay. And Dr. James, you're a doctor on contract with this management company for emergency response.
Yes, definitely. I'm a pharmacist by training. A lot of my prior experience came from CVS. I did these COVID clinics prior to. I managed the long-term care facilities and COVID vaccination clinics through there. And that's kind of led a segue into being the medical director for Indelible. Aside from that, I have Healthcare Equity Solutions. I'm the president and CEO of that. And I kind of partner with Indelible to serve as the medical director for this engagement.
And that does lend a comfort level to the communities that you're working with to have someone who's trained in the medical field be able to field those questions when they get to be a little bit more specific than just general overview picture.
Yes, definitely. We've been working vigorously at this since about last November when everything first started. We started at the long-term care facilities, and then we kind of cascaded out the vaccine as it came out, and that's up until what we see today here now.
Okay, wonderful. So let's get a couple of updates. Let's get updates on vaccine numbers. Where are we at? Where are we standing here?
So really good. So as it stands right now, you have Miami-Dade County have the fully vaccinated percent that's for people 12 and older of about 68%. So that's something to celebrate. In Broward County, we have a fully vaccinated 12 and older percent of about 63%. And in Palm Beach County, 60% of that same patient population. So those are, I can honestly say that is something good. That's something that we should celebrate. But when we get a little more granular and we dig down into those numbers, you see some communities, the African-American community and the Latino community, especially the Hispanic Latino community, especially, who have such a lot lower vaccination rates opposed to the amount of disease, the amount of new cases that we're seeing right now. As it stands, African Americans and the Hispanic and Latino community, we make up about 2/3 of the new cases that we see. And we have, in opposition to that, we only have a vaccination rate of about 17.4%. So,
less than 20% in those minority communities.
Yes,
but we're talking about 66, almost 70% of new cases.
Right,
it's a glaring disparity.
Right. And just to give you more perspective, just to drill down a little more into that number, it's 3.7 million African Americans in the state of Florida, and only 790,000 of them are fully vaccinated at this time. So if you look there, it shows we really have some work to do.
And I really want to talk about this more because I'm extremely interested in how this affects the resources and the availability once we hit those goal numbers. So again, try to explain to our viewers and people that are watching. I know that we have these benchmarks that are set by the government and by local leaders. We have 70%, 75, 80%. And then once we hit that numbers and we've achieved this, desired herd immunity that we're all working towards, I hope that this is not the case, but I believe that the resources for the vaccine might be less readily available.
Yeah.
Well,
You want to take that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's a great segue, and I want to also touch a little bit on what you asked in the beginning, right? Those two separate names. So VAX 305 is actually a strategic initiative that the Indelible started with the Division of Emergency Management and DOH for reasons just like that. You know, Dr. James mentioned how in African American communities there's a lot more hesitancy in communities of color, and a lot of times that's because of misinformation. Because they don't always have access to healthcare. They haven't been going to the doctor very frequently. So there's some of a distrust, as well as, people need to know more information, right? They don't know as much about the vaccine. Folks are concerned about how quickly it was made. So we understand that there's healthy hesitancy. And then we transition into the numbers, right? So our project with the Division of Emergency Management will soon be sunsetting. And what that means is DEM, as far as the state sites that are available right now, are going to be transitioning, and maybe the local departments of health might take them up, but the chances are the resources won't be there. And so where you see these state sites in places where they made sure to have access, more so in communities of color, aside from the public, CVS, and some of those other places you can go, they put those there. But now that they're closing, that does present a potential vulnerability for folks that are still waiting on the sideline.
Okay, that's okay. So there's a lot to dissect there.
Absolutely,
there is a lot to
absolutely.
dissect there. What do you think the biggest contributing factor to that hesitancy? I mean, I know there's a lot of misinformation, and there is unfortunately some mistrust.
Right.
Yes.
But what do you think is that biggest factor, and how can we overcome that?
If I had to point to, I would say one thing that that leads to the biggest amount of hesitancy, it would be exactly what you just mentioned, and it's the distrust of the government. As we all know, traditionally the African American community has been not always taken care of by the government, in which that inhibits this country today. And a lot of the times when we're out, when we have those outreach people that we have on the ground doing canvassing, going door to door, they get and they hear a lot about the Tuskegee experiment. I like to hear that one because I myself is a graduate of Tuskegee. And once we are faced with that, I like to combat it with the COVID-19 pandemic. What we're seeing is different from the Tuskegee experiment in a lot of ways. First and foremost, the COVID-19 pandemic, it touched all 7 continents on planet Earth. If we look and we compare that side by side with the Tuskegee experiment, it was extremely targeted to the people of Macon County, Alabama. And not only was it targeted, it was the denial of healthcare, the denial of access to study a disease state as it played out on the African American community. So if we look at those and we dissect those a little bit, we'll see that those are two totally different situations. And COVID-19, this COVID pandemic, wasn't a ploy for a specific demographic of people.
Yeah.
Wow, absolutely. That's heavy information that you're
For
giving
sure.
out here.
And along with what Dr. James said, another thing that we find is the misinformation, right? We live in a technology age where bloggers, influencers all have kind of a public platform where they can say pretty much whatever it is they like to. And one thing we like to let people know is it's important to make sure you're getting your information from experts, right? Not from your family members or your peers if they don't have any type of background in medicine or if they don't have a scientific background. And so we find a lot of times people are hearing things about microchips in the vaccine, other things about, trying to mass eradicate people. I mean, and it's serious because that's certain people's mindsets. And we have to approach that very delicately, because one thing we don't do with our initiative is shame people. It's not about making people feel bad or trying to make them seem like they're below it. We really want to make sure that they understand why they should take it, understand why it's safe. And that's why Dr. James and his medical team is so important, because talking to someone in the medical field and being able to call them and ask those questions are really important for them.
That's huge. So the two things that we come out of that is we have a lot of misinformation and mistrust.
Yeah.
But truly, I mean, this vaccine, this pandemic has not discriminated across any community. It's hit everyone in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
You have been affected by what's happened over the past 12 to 14 months. And so we want to do everything in our power to get back to normal. And
Right.
That said a lot.
Right,
Said a lot.
definitely.
Get back to
And
normal. It said a lot, but
whatever
it's
normal
true.
seems like now, right?
Yeah.
And that's important because it looks normal, right? When you look around Miami, I know a lot of folks are probably starting to go back to restaurants. They're starting to go back to events and parties. And while that's great for the economy, while that's great for us to finally have a sense of coming back together, if you're unvaccinated, if you're moving around, you're going to parties, you're going to events with your family, and you're not vaccinated, you're putting folks at a vulnerable place, as well as yourself, because not only about the COVID-19 virus that we've faced here, but we know currently there are different variants that are traveling around the world. And Miami is an international tourist spot, right?
Large
So
metropolitan area.
Right.
Yes.
We're at the hub of where all people come. It's a very transient place. And so we have to be aware of these other variants like the UK variants and those that are in India that have been found to be much more contagious as well as more dangerous.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about the vaccine and about the different vaccines and what that means. But just to wrap up on kind of where we at with the updates and the numbers, you talked about Miami-Dade County, you talked about Palm Beach, talked about Broward County. I have two questions regarding that. How does that compare to the rest of Florida, the state of Florida, and what do we look like as a whole state? And then comparing Miami-Dade County, because Miami, like you just mentioned, an international city, large metropolitan area. How does Miami-Dade County compare to other large metropolitan areas across the country?
So I would say from a Florida perspective nationally, right? If you look at the entire state of Florida, right now we're in the middle of the pack. You know, we're, as far as vaccination rates are concerned, statewide, we're probably around 25th or 26th as far as our vaccination population is concerned. In Miami-Dade County, as Dr. James mentioned, we're at 68%, which is pretty much on track for what the White House and on the national level that we're trying to reach at that 70% by July 4th.
Right.
And I think that Miami-Dade County is certainly on track for that when you look at the bigger picture. But as we said before, those numbers can be deceiving because if you're looking at the major population, you also have those Haitian populations, you have other Caribbean populations, Hispanic and diverse Latin cultures that are not getting vaccinated at that same rate. And so it's important to understand, especially here in Miami-Dade County, that there has to be a diverse way of outreach to reach different people in a way that they accept and that they'll believe.
And I know that this is, not controversial per se, but there's been a lot of success with incentivizing the vaccine, giving whatever it may be, everything from gift cards to lotteries and free cars, and the rest of the country is doing this. And have you seen a correlation to that with minority communities specifically?
So we have heard a lot about incentivizing the vaccine, and there's a lot of opinions on that. Some folks are for it. Some people are a little bit against it because it seems like you're trying, I don't know, you're coercing someone,
buying them.
Buying them. And I mean, that is an opinion that is held by different.
We don't
folks,
want someone to take the vaccine to get, a Publix gift card. We want you to take the vaccine because you believe in it, because you trust the science, because it's the right thing to do
correct.
For the betterment of the community. That's why you should be getting vaccinated.
And then you leave feeling good about it,
yes,
right? You don't
it's very
feel
altruistic thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't feel like, oh man, was it really worth this? And now you're thinking about it for the rest of the week, the rest of the month. And so here in Florida, you haven't really seen any mass incentivization, at least from a state level.
Right.
I know some other states, governors are instituting these lotteries and other things like that. But Governor DeSantis has not done anything like that. And I feel like what we've been doing to incentivize things is a little different. We try to make sure that when we have our vaccination clinics or if we have our outreach events, we're collaborating with other organizations in the community that provide resources like healthcare information, that access to food, right? Early childhood care and other things like senior services
and additional health services. I've seen a lot of health fairs that have combined, screenings, different types of screenings with the vaccine. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop. Let's get you checked out and make sure that you're healthy.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that we like to add into that is, and one of the key messages, key takeaways we try and push, that it's not about you. Although you may be strong and healthy enough, your immune system may be strong and healthy enough to catch the virus and beat it, you then carry it home to mom, to dad, to grandma, to granddad, who may not be as strong, who may not be as in fighting condition, who immune system may not be as strong as yours. So then you don't want to live with that. So a lot of times the takeaway message is, if you don't want to take it, if you have your questions answered and it's something that you don't want to do, it's not about you. It like you said earlier, it's the altruistic thing to do.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. There's also been a lot of questions about fertility with this vaccine, how it affects all levels of fertility, whether you are pregnant or you're breastfeeding or you plan on becoming pregnant in the near future, let's say, 12 months.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because
Yes.
there's a lot of hesitancy with that specific issue.
Definitely. And we get that and we hear that quite a bit. About 2 months ago, it was data that came out that breastfeeding mothers could actually pass immunity through to their children through breast milk. So that was a big win for healthcare. As it stands right now, there aren't any limitations or any contraindications against a pregnant woman being vaccinated. So yeah, that's the most latest data around that, and that's where it stands.
Okay, and then a really good segue from that point. We've seen the vaccine age be lowered consistently, and I think right now it's 12 and up. And what are plans, if any, for it being open to children younger than 12?
So and that's really good because we will consistently see that. The fact of the matter is the vaccine is doing some really, really good things. When we talk about efficacy of the vaccine, the only other vaccine that we know that we have today that has higher efficacy than the COVID-19 vaccine, that's the measles shot. And if we just look historically, what vaccines has done for us, if you ask a child today what is chickenpox, they'll look at you like you're crazy. They don't know, and that itself is all thanks to vaccinations. Measles, we don't hear often about measles outbreaks anymore. That is all thanks to vaccines. So when you look at a vaccine that has 94% efficacy, that was one of the main drivers in that age being lowered to help produce that herd immunity that we're looking for by July 4th.
And I know that there's been a lot of conversation about, wow, this vaccine was developed so quickly, and that leads to a little bit of the hesitancy. Like, I don't know if I want to take this. You guys developed it really, really quickly. But when we talk about how our world has evolved, in the past few years, and how our technology has evolved, talk about that growth in technology and that growth in just medicine and breakthroughs in those fields, being able to develop a vaccine this quickly that works.
Yes, definitely. And I like to tell people a lot of times, think about a dream team of researchers all working together for one common cause. And when you think about it like that, when you think about the brightest minds in Germany, the brightest minds in China, the brightest minds right here in America, when you think about it like that, it's like, would it really take that long? But it's also an added facet to that. This same vaccination technology is being used. I know we all remember the Ebola outbreak in Africa. This same vaccine technology is being used in the Ebola vaccine, and a lot of our guidance as to how we track it and what we will see moving forward came from that. So I don't want people to think that, hey, this is brand new, just was thought of yesterday. No, this technology has been being studied over 30 years. It's actually in play in Africa via the Ebola virus, and COVID-19 just presented itself for us to actually take advantage of the technology. So it's not something that's brand new. So that's how I like to kind of combat that hesitancy around, hey, this is brand new, this just happened. No, it's actually not brand new. It's been studied and it's actually in play right now as it stands.
Yeah, a lot. I think, and I've been saying this across the board as it relates to multiple fields, but during this pandemic, what I saw across the board was more collaboration versus competition. I think we're constantly, there's always going to be competition. I mean, that's just how the world works. But during this pandemic, everyone was faced with the same problem. Everyone was faced with the same challenge. Right. And now you have, like you said, everyone working together to try to find a solution because we all have the same problem.
Right, absolutely. And that's a big part of our initiative. The reason that we've been able to be so successful and get the exposure that we're getting to get the word out is because of the community partnerships we've been able to develop, working with chambers of commerce like South Dade Chamber, the Greater Miami-Dade Chamber, also local community organizations like Breaking the Cycle, which is a African-American cycling organization of about 300 plus people that cycle for great causes. They for public health initiatives. And so those, along with a lot of the community influencers like Papa Keith and a lot of the other folks that we've had a chance to go on their shows and reach their audiences, those partnerships are extremely important. And I think one of the things that we can take away from the pandemic is the idea of getting out of silos. A lot of times our communities could be a lot more together, and we could probably address a lot more of these issues if we would work more together. We would communicate a little bit more. And like you said, not worry about competing against each other. Let's just try to compete against COVID, right?
Collaboration is key.
Yeah,
It really
definitely.
is. And we've come a long way with that, especially recently. And I think that's huge. One more question before we wrap up.
Okay.
And I think this has been on everyone's minds because we've all, we've done our part. We've gotten the vaccines. Well, it's a vaccine. And,
Right.
and historically with vaccines, you have boosters,
Right.
right? So I want to know, what do we see the future of this vaccine looking like? Is it going to be a booster? Is it going to be like a 1-2 time booster? Is it going to be an annual thing that we're going to have to do? What does that look like? What can you tell us? I know you don't have all the answers, but what do you think? What do you think is going to happen there?
So as it stands right now, Pfizer has already came out and said they have approved a 6-month booster. But the fact of the matter is it's a virus. And if it's not eradicated, it will mutate and it will take on different strands and different forms. So it's a living thing as well. So that was one of the really big reasons for the big push for everyone to get vaccinated, because we know in medicine that if this virus stays around, it's a live living thing as well. So it'll mutate. So if I had to personally take a stab at a guess, will we need a booster? I think we will. I think coronavirus will be around and it'll be something that we just have to deal with over time. And I think that as we move on, as we move forward, as people see that their loved ones that got vaccinated are still doing fine, that as they see that the people around them that was vaccinated are doing fine, the trust level will rise and we will have better vaccination rates.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Again, thank you so much, Mikhail, Dr. James, Dr. Bruce. Thank you so much. As they said, it's not about you. It's about the community. So please go out, do your part, get vaccinated, and join us next week, Thursday, for another Chambersat Spotlight with our partners here at Miami Community Newspapers. Thank you.